I go, has any doctor ever sat down and talked to you about what you should be eating for your autoimmune condition?
Mhm.
And they're like, no. And autoimmune conditions, especially Hashimoto's, you touched on the gluten and lactose, but gut microbiome is so important for that.
I agree.
And that's something that you do not learn that in medical school. You don't learn anything about the gut microbiome in medical school. The only reason I learned about it during school is because I flew out to Oklahoma to work with a functional endocrinologist who
Oh,
taught
wow.
me everything that I need to know about gut health. And she has an awesome book out. Her name's Cassie Smith. I'm just reading her book right now that I would definitely recommend for you too. But any autoimmune, any inflamed person watching this, you have to realize how important the gut microbiome is.
Yeah.
And that's something that I talk a lot about in this cookbook because it's something that's so overlooked. I mean, you can talk about calories in, calories out. You can talk about macronutrients. But here's the thing. If your gut is inflamed and you can't even absorb these nutrients that you're eating, nothing's going to be working, right?
Yeah.
The majority of your immune system stems in your gut. That's why autoimmune conditions is so important, is to work on gut health and foods that are going to be helping your gut. Your serotonin, your dopamine all come from your gut as well. There's so many mental conditions out there. I always tell people who are depressed, some people think that they eat poorly because they're depressed, when in reality, they're depressed because they eat poorly.
Yeah.
There's a big correlation with gut health and overall just human optimization of how your body works. And people really overlook that. So I'm happy that you brought that up.
Yeah. So if you want to explain to the audience, what is leaky gut, why that is harmful, and what are the first steps to improve that?
Sure. So I think explaining leaky gut, you need to start off with the anatomy of the gut. So you have all this small and large intestine, typically where all the nutrients and water is being absorbed through this very thin cell membrane.
Yeah.
And outside of this membrane, you have to think of the gut as like a water slide. It's kind of like it's like a big tube, and around the tube is this mucus, and then there's all these bacteria. There's more bacteria in your gut than there are cells in your body. And this is where the majority of our human genomes come from, is actually the bacteria. I think the human genome is about 30 million, but the gut bacteria is about 90 million. So we actually get a lot of our genes stemming from these bacteria. So there are good guys in the gut and bad guys in the gut. And typically the analogy that I use is everyone has a garden. Some people have a lot of good flowers, a lot of colorful flowers in the garden. Other people grow a lot of weeds. But what's interesting about this garden is that the gardener is not what's feeding the garden. The garden actually tells the gardener what it wants to eat. So if you have a bunch of weeds in your gut, those guys are going to be craving a lot of the processed foods, ultra processed sugars, carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is these bacteria can actually tell your brain, I'm craving these, because in order for them to live, they need that environment to live in.
Exactly.
Versus good flowers, diverse, colorful flowers. They like lots of fruits and vegetables. They like good sources of protein, whole foods, and they thrive off that. So depending on what you're eating and depending on what your gut is craving, it's really going to depend on what you're going to be eating throughout the day. So leaky gut is, what happens is over time, there's a thing called dysbiosis, where you have an imbalance of these good to bad bacteria. And over time, if these bad bacteria continue to grow due to eating ultra-processed foods, lots of sugar, food dyes, glyphosates, all these different additives that they're putting in our ingredients, over time, these bad bacteria continue to rise. And when these bacteria die off, all the gram negatives, they release an endotoxin called lipopolysaccharide. Lipopolysaccharide is the same thing that you'd find on an E. coli bacteria. And what it does is it actually starts breaking apart these tight junctions that hold our cells together. So when you have these broken tight junctions, you have pretty much an open filter between what you're eating and your direct bloodstream.
Yeah.
That's why you have so much immune system in your gut, because it's a big filter, right? It's one of the biggest filters in our body is our gut. So that's why there's all these immune cells that sit there. So if you start eating all these processed foods, you're going to continuously break down this gut lining, driving a lot of inflammation into your direct bloodstream. That's where autoimmune comes from. Autoimmune conditions are systemic inflammation on your body. And they never taught me this in medical school. But in order to be fixing leaky gut, and honestly, it just starts with small steps. But the very first step you have to make is you have to make the change from processed foods to whole foods. And you have to start looking at ingredient labels. And that's something that in my app that I made is so important, because I want people looking at ingredients. Because if you're looking at some sort of ingredient from the grocery store and it has a paragraph of different ingredients and you can't even read half of them, that's not going to be good food for you. you need to be sticking with whole foods, lean meats, right? Your chicken, your beef, your steak, fish, shrimp, eggs, yogurt, kefir, all these things. You need to be sticking to good carbohydrates, rice, quinoa, sweet potatoes, and also good fiber. And I always tell people 3 meals per day. And I always say follow the 40-40-20. So 40% of your plate protein, 40% fiber, and 20% carbs. If you start focusing on implementing a little bit more fiber, hydrating super well, focusing on whole foods, all these things can help grow better bacteria. But one of the most simplest things to do to help fix your gut microbiome is simply eating a fermented food to break your fast every single day.
Yeah.
Kefir, sauerkraut, kombucha, Greek yogurt, those foods are a powerhouse for our gut. And if you can start implementing that daily habit into your life, you will see so much impact on your overall gut microbiome that people do not even realize. I tell my patients, do you like sauerkraut? And they're always like, no. And I'm like, well, start eating it in the morning. Too bad. I'm telling you, because it's one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah.